In the final months of World War II, as American forces closed in on the Japanese home islands, one of history's greatest treasure mysteries began to unfold. Japan had accumulated vast quantities of gold during its wartime expansion across Asia. Yet when the war ended in August 1945, much of this wealth had simply vanished. The question of where Japan's gold reserves disappeared to has haunted historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists for nearly 8 decades. And the answers involve American occupation forces, shadowy operations, and secrets that may never be fully revealed. To understand the scale of what disappeared, we need to grasp just how much wealth Japan had amassed. During the 1930s and early 1940s, Japanese forces systematically looted the territories they conquered. From Manchuria to Singapore, from the Philippines to Indonesia, Japanese military and civilian authorities confiscated gold reserves from central banks, private banks, wealthy families, and religious institutions. They stripped gold from temples in Burma, emptied bank vaults in Hong Kong, and seized the treasuries of defeated colonial powers. Conservative estimates suggest Japan had accumulated somewhere between 6,000 and 9,000 tons of gold by 1945. Though some researchers believe the true figure could have been significantly higher. To put this in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the entire gold reserves of the United States at that time. As the tide of war turned against Japan in 1944, the imperial government faced a critical problem. They knew defeat was increasingly likely, and they needed to hide their wealth from the advancing Allies. What followed was one of the most ambitious treasure concealment operations in history. The Japanese began moving gold, platinum, diamonds, and other valuables out of major cities and into remote locations. Some was sent to Manchuria, where Japan maintained its puppet state of Manchukuo. Much more was hidden throughout the Japanese home islands in caves, tunnels, and underground bunkers. Naval vessels transported gold to remote Pacific islands. Submarines carried precious metals to secret locations. The operation was conducted with military precision and absolute secrecy. The Philippines became a particular focus of Japanese treasure concealment efforts. Under the direction of Prince Chichibu, the younger brother of Emperor Hirohito, and allegedly supervised by General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the Tiger of Malaya, massive quantities of looted treasure were hidden in the Philippine Islands. This treasure, which would later become known as Yamashita's gold, was reportedly buried in over 100 different locations using prisoner-of-war labor. The workers who dug these hiding places were often killed after completing their work to ensure secrecy. The locations included natural caves, hand-dug tunnels, and elaborate underground complexes, some running hundreds of feet below the surface. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, the Supreme Commander of Allied Powers, General Douglas MacArthur, took control of occupied Japan. American forces immediately began the enormous task of documenting Japanese assets and ensuring reparations could be paid to the countries Japan had devastated. Official records from the occupation period show that American forces discovered and seized various quantities of gold, platinum, silver, and other valuables. These discoveries were carefully documented, photographed, and transferred to the United States or used as part of the reparations program. However, the amounts officially recorded fall dramatically short of what Japan was believed to have possessed. This discrepancy is where the theories begin. The official American position has always been that Japan's gold reserves were largely depleted by the war effort itself. The explanation goes that Japan sold gold on international markets to purchase war materials, paid neutral countries for supplies, and used precious metals to prop up the currencies of its occupied territories and puppet states. According to this narrative, there simply wasn't as much gold remaining by the war's end as people imagine. The Japanese government, for its part, claimed that American bombing had destroyed many facilities where gold was stored, and that in the chaos of defeat, accurate records were impossible to maintain. But alternative theories have persisted, and they center on the possibility that American forces, both officially and unofficially, recovered far more treasure than was ever publicly acknowledged. The most prominent theory involves what has been called the Black Eagle Trust, or the Golden Lily Project. According to researchers who have investigated this theory, American intelligence operatives under MacArthur's command discovered enormous quantities of hidden Japanese treasure in the Philippines and possibly in Japan itself. Rather than turning this wealth over for reparations or returning it to the countries from which it was stolen, these theorists argue that the treasure was seized and placed into secret off-the-books accounts. The alleged purpose of this secret treasure fund was to finance covert Cold War operations. As the Soviet Union emerged as America's primary adversary, the thinking goes, American intelligence agencies needed massive amounts of untraceable funding for operations that couldn't go through normal congressional appropriations. The Black Eagle Trust supposedly provided this funding, allowing the CIA and other agencies to conduct covert operations, manipulate foreign governments, and influence global events without public or congressional oversight. Proponents of this theory point to the timing, noting that the CIA was established in 1947, just 2 years after the war ended, and that the early Cold War saw an enormous expansion of covert operations that would have required substantial funding. Evidence supporting these theories comes from various sources, though much of it is circumstantial or based on testimony rather than documentary proof. Some former American servicemen stationed in the Philippines during the immediate post-war period later claimed to have witnessed the recovery of enormous caches of gold bars, though their stories couldn't be independently verified. There are accounts of sealed tunnels and mysterious excavations conducted under tight security. Some researchers have pointed to financial transactions in the late 1940s and 1950s that involved large movements of gold through Switzerland and other neutral countries, suggesting that recovered Japanese treasure was being quietly laundered into the international financial system. One of the most controversial figures in this story is Severino Garcia Diaz Santa Romana, known as Santi, who allegedly worked for American intelligence in the Philippines during and after the war. According to various accounts, Santa Romana was involved in locating and recovering Japanese treasure sites and may have managed secret accounts containing recovered gold. Documents that have surfaced over the years suggest he controlled accounts containing staggering sums, though the authenticity and significance of these documents remain disputed. Santa Romana died in 1974, taking whatever secrets he possessed to his grave. The treasure hunting aspect of this mystery has spawned an entire subculture in the Philippines and Japan. In the Philippines particularly, treasure hunting for Yamashita's gold has been a persistent phenomenon for decades. Hundreds of groups and individuals have searched for hidden Japanese treasure armed with maps of dubious authenticity, stories from supposed witnesses, and metal detectors. A few have claimed to have found treasure, though verified discoveries have been remarkably scarce. The Philippine government has dealt with numerous legal cases involving treasure hunting claims, and the activity has sometimes led to environmental damage and even fatalities when unstable tunnels collapse on searchers. The most famous treasure hunting case involved Rogelio Roxas, a Filipino locksmith who claimed to have discovered a massive golden Buddha statue and numerous gold bars in a tunnel system in the 1970s. Roxas alleged that Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos learned of his discovery and seized the treasure, using it to fund his regime and personal wealth. Roxas sued the Marcos estate in Hawaiian court and won a judgment, though collecting on that judgment proved nearly impossible. The case brought international attention to the question of Japanese war treasure and added fuel to theories about how much might still be hidden. The Japanese government's own records from the immediate post-war period are notably incomplete regarding gold reserves. While some documentation survived, much was destroyed in the final months of the war, either through American bombing or deliberate destruction by Japanese officials who wanted to conceal the full extent of what had been looted. Bank of Japan records show large withdrawals and transfers of gold in 1944 and 1945, but the destinations of these shipments are often listed vaguely or not at all. Some researchers have noted that if Japan had truly spent or lost all its gold during the war, the country's post-war recovery would have been even more difficult than it was. Yet Japan managed to rebuild with remarkable speed. Another angle to this mystery involves Switzerland and other neutral countries. During the war, Japan sold quantities of gold to Switzerland, Sweden, and Portugal to obtain hard currency and war materials. Some of this gold was later identified as having been looted from occupied territories, leading to post-war negotiations about its return. However, the amounts that went through these channels, while significant, don't account for the bulk of what Japan is believed to have possessed. Some theories suggest that additional treasure was moved through Switzerland after the war under American control, using Swiss banking secrecy to obscure its origins and purposes. The human cost of this treasure story deserves emphasis. The gold and valuables that Japan accumulated represented not just wealth, but the systematic plundering of entire societies. Families were stripped of their savings, institutions of their endowments, nations of their reserves. The Allied prisoners of war, who were forced to dig hiding places in the Philippines, worked under brutal conditions, and many were executed to maintain secrecy. If significant quantities of this looted treasure were indeed recovered and never returned to their rightful owners or their countries of origin, it represents a profound injustice, compounding the original theft. Modern researchers using declassified documents have found intriguing hints, but not definitive proof of large-scale American recovery and concealment of Japanese treasure. Documents released under Freedom of Information Act requests show that American forces did locate and secure various treasure sites, and that some intelligence operatives were specifically tasked with finding hidden Japanese assets. However, the full extent of what was found remains unclear, with many relevant documents still classified or redacted. The argument for continued classification is typically that disclosure might reveal intelligence methods or cause diplomatic complications. But to skeptics, this looks like an effort to hide uncomfortable truths. One challenge in assessing these theories is that legitimate covert operations did occur during the early Cold War, and they did require funding. The CIA overthrew governments, funded political parties, and conducted propaganda operations around the world. Some of this funding came through creative means that weren't fully disclosed to Congress or the public. Whether any of this involved recovered Japanese treasure is a different question, but the operational need for such funds did exist, which gives the theories a certain plausibility even if direct evidence remains elusive. The mystery also intersects with questions about Emperor Hirohito's personal wealth. The imperial family possessed enormous assets, and there have long been questions about whether some of the emperor's wealth was moved offshore or concealed during the war. After the war, American occupiers chose not to prosecute Hirohito for war crimes and worked to preserve the imperial institution as a stabilizing force in Japan. Some researchers have suggested this decision was influenced by agreements regarding treasure or financial arrangements, though again, definitive evidence is lacking. As decades have passed, the likelihood of resolving this mystery completely has diminished. Witnesses from that era have died, documents have been lost or destroyed, and memories have faded. Physical evidence, if it exists in the form of hidden treasure still in the ground, becomes harder to find with each passing year as landscapes change and old landmarks disappear. The Philippine jungle reclaims excavated sites, Japanese caves collapse or are developed over, and the people who knew precise locations are gone. Yet the mystery endures because the implications are so significant. If substantial quantities of looted Japanese gold were recovered and used for secret purposes, rather than returned to their rightful owners, it would represent one of the great hidden scandals of the post-war era. It would mean that wealth stolen from Asian nations during brutal occupation was never returned and instead funded American covert operations. It would also mean that the official histories of both the occupation of Japan and the early Cold War are missing crucial chapters. On the other hand, if the disappearance of Japan's gold has more mundane explanations involving wartime expenditure, bombing damage, and incomplete records, then the mystery is largely a matter of historical fog rather than deliberate concealment. What we can say with certainty is that Japan did accumulate vast quantities of looted treasure during the war, that much of this wealth was hidden as defeat approached, and that the full accounting of what happened to it has never been satisfactorily completed. We know that American forces did discover and secure some treasure sites, and we know that the Cold War created pressures for covert funding. Whether these facts connect in the ways that the most dramatic theories suggest remains an open question, one that continues to fascinate anyone drawn to the intersection of history, mystery, and the enduring power of hidden gold.